Discover the incredible journey of embracing your true self. 7 Transformative Lessons Revealed. Jake Turner felt the weight of grease-stained hands and family expectations as he sat under the fluorescent hum of the garage lights. At 28, he wore the title of mechanic like a worn-out jacket. Yet deep inside, a longing for something more clashed with the familiar rhythm of life his father had crafted. The old man, a grizzled war veteran, proudly insisted on hard work and loyalty, instilling in Jake the belief that security was the ultimate goal. But beneath this facade of contentment, Jake sensed a relentless fire fading within him, extinguished by years of living someone else's dream. One sultry afternoon, compelled by an unrelenting curiosity, he rummaged through boxes in his attic, dust swirling like ghosts in the sunbeams. His hands brushed against a weathered sketchbook belonging to his late grandmother. Opening it, nostalgia crashed over him. Vibrant illustrations spilled forth, bringing to life a world of color that painted the mundanity of his days. To his shock and awe, he discovered she had been a celebrated artist, breaking through barriers in the creative world long before he existed. Inspiration surged within him. The creative spark he thought had been extinguished flared to life, igniting desires buried under years of duty. Jake knew he had to give this art business a shot, but stepping into that chaotic world twisted his stomach into knots. Would Charlie, a local art dealer, see the potential that Jake felt burning within? The prospect brought both exhilaration and dread. What would his father say? The thought of disappointing him weighed heavier than any tool in the garage. He could already picture the disappointed shake of his dad's head, the sorrow settling like an unwelcome guest between them. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every nervous brushstroke on canvas felt like a rebellion, a fight against conformity. Yet with every piece he showcased, there lingered an unshakable fear. The judgment of his neighbors, their eyes boring into him, questioning why he would abandon the family legacy. Each encounter at the gallery reinforced the feeling that he was veering off a predetermined path. Tension crackled in the air, heightening each heartbeat that thrummed in his chest. The moment came with the biting edge of his father's voice echoing in his mind. Art? That's no way to make a living. When Jake finally revealed his aspirations, the look that crossed his father's face twisted something fragile inside him. This was not just a disagreement. This was a fracture threatening to splinter their relationship. The guilt consumed him as he sought approval with every labored breath. Standing on a precipice between familial duty and personal longing, a pulse of desperation surged through him. Would he shatter the familial bonds that held him in place, or would he find the courage to leap toward his true identity? The weight of that decision loomed, heavy and oppressive, echoing in the silence of his soul. As sirens suddenly blared in the distance, the familiar sound of routine, Jake felt a shiver of fear grip him. Here he stood, pulsing with urgency at the brink of self-discovery, each heartbeat underscoring the question that hung in the air. Could he truly break free? Amid the mounting pressure of expectations and the labyrinth of his thoughts, Jake faced the canvas once more. The brush felt foreign in his hand, like an extension of both his ambition and his trepidation. Each stroke breathed life into colors that whispered promises of possibility. While the paint settled into grooves and valleys, his mind raced, contemplating the gravity of the upcoming meeting with Charlie. Would he view Jake not merely as a mechanic seeking a hobby, but as a fledgling artist yearning for acknowledgement? Emboldened by the memories of his grandmother, Jake pressed on. The echoes of her artistic triumphs fused with his own resolve, pushing him toward the drive that had long eluded him. Maybe, just maybe, creativity could be a viable path, one that didn't hinge on the weight of established family roles. Yet, what if the leap into the artistic unknown resulted in a fall? Self-doubt slithered into his thoughts, coiling tighter and tighter, but amidst it all, a flicker of determination glimmered against the encroaching darkness. The next day, with lingering anxiety swirling in his stomach, Jake made his way across town to Charlie's gallery. The building loomed ahead, an inviting facade that contrasted with the turmoil waging war within him. As he stood at the entrance, his pulse quickened, and he froze for a moment, paralyzed by fear. What if Charlie dismissed his work? What if he wasn't good enough? This critical moment on the threshold felt monumental, a decision shrouded in consequences. Summoning his strength, Jake stepped inside. The gallery was bustling. Patrons mingled, absorbed in conversation, their laughter echoing through the air like a shared secret. Jake felt a cold sweat bead on his forehead. It struck him that while this world, vibrant and alive, presented potential for creativity, it also felt undeniably foreign. His heartbeat echoed in sync with every brush of fabric against flesh and every clinking glass. He was an interloper in a vibrant tapestry woven by the lives of those who understood artistry in its rawest form. As he approached Charlie, the nerve-wracking possibility of failure pulsed through him. Jake introduced himself, hands slightly trembling. Was he ready for this? The tension hung like smoke in the air. "Jake, nice to meet you. Your pieces have an intriguing energy," Charlie said. Eyeing the work, Jake had brought his collection of paint-streaked canvases colored with emotion and rebellion. "Thanks. I've tried to capture what I feel." Jake stumbled through his words, grappling with the rawness of his ambition. "Art is about vulnerability, isn't it? What do you hope someone takes away from your work?" Charlie inquired, his gaze intense. The question dug deep. What did he hope? Was it validation or a connection? For the first time, Jake couldn't merely answer for himself. He was confronted with the deeper truth behind his art. "I want them to see that there's more than meets the eye. Existence isn't just about routine. It's about passion. The spark that ignites when you truly embrace who you are." A flicker of interest ignited in Charlie's eyes, igniting an unexpected confidence in Jake. Maybe it wasn't just about seeking acceptance. Perhaps in expressing himself he could also find freedom. But as soon as that thought surfaced, stark reality crashed back. He was still adrift in a sea of expectations and opinions. Immediate memories of his father's disappointment flooded him. Charlie's next words brought Jake back to the present. "Let's set up a showing for your work. It could be a great opportunity for you." The excitement and fear bottlenecked in his throat. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but before any words formed, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts. It was his father, arriving unexpectedly at the gallery. The very figure he feared would oppose his aspirations had now entered the sacred space where he sought validation. Would this moment shatter everything he had begun to build or ignite a new understanding? With his heart pounding like a drum, Jake turned to face the man who represented his past and the expectations he had fought against. The confrontation awaited them both, the canvas of Jake's life ready to be painted anew, but only through a courageous act of engagement. The moment had arrived. Now he must confront the question that loomed large. Would he defend his passion or succumb to regret? Jake's breath hitched as he turned to face his father. The man stood there, tall and imposing, framed by the art that felt, in that moment, both beautiful and threatening. Memories flickered in his mind, the countless times he had fallen short of his father's expectations, the endless spiral of disappointment that had shadowed his childhood. Now here he was, exposed and vulnerable, standing at the crossroads of self-expression and familial obligation. "Jake, what are you doing here?" His father's voice, tinged with surprise, held a note of disapproval. Jake felt the weight of that simple question suffocating him, wrapping around his chest like a vice. How could he explain that art had become his lifeline, a way to defy the suffocating narrative of a life dictated by others? Gathering his resolve, Jake focused on Charlie, who silently observed. The artist forced himself to break the silence. "I'm showcasing my work. This is a glimpse into who I am." Confidence trembled within him like a candle threatened by the wind, yet his words carved a path through the uncertainty. His father's brow furrowed, disbelief etched across his features. "Your work? You think this is a real career?" The blast of condescension hit Jake with the force of a slap. A wave of shame crashed over him, merging with a rising tide of anger. "This isn't just a hobby. This matters to me. Can't you understand that?" The plea hung between them as if seeking a bridge over their chasm of disconnection. Charlie's presence was a steadying force, a gentle reminder of why he had come to this place. Jake took a step forward, willing to risk everything: his father's approval, his carefully manicured identity, even the fear of failure. I want to create. I want my art to mean something. Can't you see how important that is? His father's expression shifted, perhaps softening slightly, yet Jake wasn't naive enough to clutch at hope just yet. Maybe all he would receive was a battlement of mockery for his aspirations. Nonetheless, the realization of wanting acceptance on his terms surged within him. What if Jake didn't need his father's validation to pursue his art? The idea blossomed in the silence that followed, brightening the edges of his darkness. Yet, the fear of rejection persisted, lurking just behind every word. Despite the uncertainty, he pressed on. I know you might not believe in this, but I need you to see me see who I want to become. The conversation stood as a fulcrum point, a moment of potential transformation. Jake awaited his father's response, the air thick with tension, electric with possibility. Would this be the moment he'd stand firm, or would he falter under the familiar weight of familial expectations? His father, for the first time, seemed to search for words, as if burdened by the gravitational pull of their history. Jake, you've always been weighed down by your expectations? Jake interjected, allowing bitterness to seep in. Uncertainty tangled with determination, but every fiber of his being clamored for honesty, for a release from the shackles of his upbringing. I just want you to succeed, his father replied, the defensiveness softening in a way that makes sense. No, success is not a one-size-fits-all, Dad. I need to forge my own path, Jake countered, the words pouring out with a force he didn't know he had. The silence that enveloped them was palpable, charged with the unseen lines drawn over years of conflict. Jake had stepped into the fire, burning away the vestiges of a version of himself that never fit. In that moment he recognized a newfound clarity. He was no longer merely a pleasing reflection in his father's eyes but a canvas waiting for his own strokes. He considered the uncharted waters ahead. A sense of possibility laced with trepidation surged through him. The need for approval from his father began to fade, making room for a budding sense of self-worth. Suddenly, Charlie clapped a hand on Jake's shoulder. Let us give your work a voice. This is just the beginning. Elated yet terrified, Jake nodded, a decision crystallizing in his mind. Ahead lay the risk of exposure, of stepping into vulnerability, painful yet exhilarating. He was ready to confront the criticisms waiting just outside the gallery doors. Yet in his father's eyes, he sought clarity. Would this encounter propel him forward, or would it bind him once more to the past? The answer hung precariously in the air as Jake turned back to his father, the fear of a future tethered to acceptance now dauntingly close. Would he be able to claim his identity as an artist, or would he find himself drowned within the confines of familial expectations? Jake's heart raced as he turned back to face the gallery, the vibrant colors and shapes of his artwork blurring in his peripheral vision. Each piece symbolized a fragment of his journey, yet now felt insubstantial compared to the monumental weight of his father's gaze. Uncertainty sank its claws into his resolve. What if this moment unraveled everything he'd worked for? He took a deep breath, convinced that what he truly needed was not defined by the recognition of an audience or even of his father, but by the act of creation itself. Each brushstroke, each choice of color was an assertion of who he wanted to be. This was no longer about proving himself. It was about discovering who he was without the confines of someone else's expectations. Charlie's voice cut through the thick silence that stretched uncomfortably between them. Jake, it's time to show your work. This moment is for you. With those words, encouragement blossomed within Jake. Charlie had always believed in his talent, seeing the potential that lay just beneath the surface. This was an opportunity for him to become more than the shadow of his father's aspirations. Gingerly, Jake stepped up to the first piece, a large canvas depicting an abstract landscape, with layers of color evoking tumultuous emotions. This one represents my struggle with self-identity, he said, feeling the need to articulate his journey, not just to his father but to himself. It's loud and chaotic because that's how I feel most of the time. He caught his father's piqued interest, a flicker of curiosity breaking through the skepticism. It was a delicate moment, and Jake allowed hope to seep in. Maybe articulating his struggles, however vulnerable, might bridge the divide between them. His father took a step closer, examining the details. You painted this? The astonishment in his voice scratched beneath Jake's skin, both pricking at old wounds and igniting a mischievous flicker of pride. Yes. Jake squared his shoulders. I did. He felt the crescendo of fear and exhilaration, the buoyancy of freedom mingling with the deep-rooted anxieties of familial disapproval. Stepping to the next piece, he explained, this one represents rebirth. The layers peel back to show brighter colors underneath. It was a work layered with rich textures, each one expressing a turning point in his life, those moments when he seized control, fought against the tide of expectations, and carved out his destiny in turbulent waters. His father's brow knitted again, yet curiosity teased his features. Jake pressed on, emboldened by the shift in tone. Every word he uttered stoked the embers of his passion further. He shared not just the stories behind the paintings, but his motivations, his fears, and the intense vulnerability he felt in sharing them. In that moment of sharing, something remarkable began to occur. The narrative shifted. Instead of focusing solely on gaining approval, Jake found himself immersed in the creation process again. He began to view art as a conversation, one that extended beyond the confines of his gallery and into the realm of personal discovery. Then he turned to his father, vulnerability painting his expression. I need you to see that this is who I am, not just what I do. I'm learning to be okay with that. Unexpected tears welled in his father's eyes, and they lingered in the air, charged with an unmistakable weight. Jake's breath stumbled. He'd never seen his father cry. But would it lead to acceptance? Would this newfound vulnerability break all the chains, or simply create a deeper rift? The thought spun wildly in Jake's mind as he braced himself for his father's response, realizing that their interaction might redefine not just their relationship, but also the trajectory of his own self-acceptance as an emerging artist. Jake stood at the precipice of change, the echoes of his past reverberating within him. The question loomed ever larger. Would bridging this gap illuminate his identity or simply reveal more shadows yet to confront? Jake's heart thudded in his chest, the vulnerability of the moment weighing heavily upon him. As he waited for his father's response, he felt as if the air had thickened around him, creating an invisible barrier that both separated and connected them. He braced himself for the unvarnished truth, both terrified and exhilarated by what lay ahead. The silence broke as his father finally spoke. I didn't realize how much this meant to you. His voice trembled, revealing the first crack in the armor built over the years. Jake leaned in, driven by an unrelenting urge to bridge the chasm between them. Art is the only way I know how to express these feelings, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. It's my language. There was a flicker of understanding in his father's eyes, as if for the first time, he recognized Jake's passion beyond the colors and canvases. How can I help? His father's tentative inquiry caught Jake off guard. Could this moment of vulnerability lead to real transformation? The years of expectation melted away, replaced by an opportunity more potent than Jake had anticipated. I want you to understand my journey. I want you to see me not just as your son, but as an artist, Jake replied. He recognized the stakes. This was a pivot point not just for their relationship, but for Jake's self-acceptance as well. Determined, he guided his father to the next piece, a swirling vortex of blues and greens. This one speaks to uncertainty. It's about navigating the unknown, a fear I've lived with, but am learning to embrace. Jake's father nodded, a hint of admiration surfacing as he inspected the layers of paint. Encouraged by this reaction, Jake pressed on, revealing deeper layers of his psyche. I've cherished your dreams for me, but I need to carve out my own path. For a brief moment, he saw a flicker of remorse in his father's eyes. Jake took a breath, feeling a surge of empathy. I know you wanted what was best for me, but I need to own my mistakes, my victories, and my identity as an artist. I need your support in exploring this side of me. With each revelation, Jake felt the tension ease, replaced by a tentative sense of shared understanding. His father's face softened, and he ran a hand over his jaw as if weighing the implications of his son's words. And just like that, they began an uncharted dialogue. They discussed the expectations set forth, his father's bewildering career ambitions, and Jake's conflicts in digesting them. Every brushstroke defied the pressures of familial expectation. As they moved from one painting to the next, Jake shared even more personal anecdotes that had shaped the divergent paths of their lives. Each revelation nudged the air toward clarity, a slow unveiling of what being a son and a father could truly mean. However, lingering in the background of their exchange was the gnawing question of Jake's own artistic future. Would this newfound connection sustain the momentum he built? Could he survive outside the expectations his father represented? The weight of these uncertainties pressed against him, creating a dynamic tension between hope and fear as they approached a final piece. An explosion of colors that symbolized Jake's dreams and aspirations, he turned to his father. I want to make this my full-time life. But I can't be a shadow. I can't live under old expectations anymore. His father's eyes glistened with a complex mix of pride and concern. You're not just chasing dreams, you're creating them. In that moment, Jake felt a palpable shift in their relationship, a foundation laid for future conversations, yet the shadows of doubt still loomed. Would the support he felt now diminish once he stepped into the larger world? Or would it turn into a fortress that shielded him from old patterns? The empowering thought that bubbled within him felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The true challenge lay not just in creating art, but in establishing a life that resonated with authenticity, one that integrated the lessons learned from this encounter. As he turned to look at his father, a question poised in the air hung between them, one that would determine the direction of their lives moving forward. Will you stand by me as I step into this new world? The room fell silent once more, anticipation crackling like electricity, and Jake realized he was not just asking for support. He was demanding recognition of his own identity. His father's answer lingered, shimmering with possibilities yet unexplored and dangers yet faced. The air hung thick with unspoken words, and Jake felt as though the scaffolding of his life had shifted beneath him. His father's gaze was an enigma, combining pride, confusion, and an unfamiliar warmth. Jake couldn't shake the perpetual voice in his head, echoing the harsh judgments and strict expectations that had defined his upbringing. Was this newfound connection genuine, or merely a fleeting moment of familial affection destined to dissolve into past patterns? A slow realization dawned on him. His journey was not only about forging his identity as an artist, it was also about transforming the very relationship with the person who had shaped so much of his life. The weight of the moment pressed into his bones, an understanding that he had to step forward into vulnerability in order to create something new, both in his art and in his personal landscape. I've always felt like an artist is someone who translates their reality, he ventured again, turning the conversation inward, hoping to pry open more of his father's understanding. Every color, every brushstroke, is part of a story that's messy, contradictory, and most importantly uniquely mine. I've spent so many years trying to be what you envision, but I think it's time to embrace what I see. His father remained quiet, absorbing the weight of these revelations. Jake felt a stirring of hope, a yearning for the acceptance he sought from the one person whose opinion had influenced him the most. Yet with that hope came an undercurrent of fear that if he pushed too hard, the fragile threads of connection they were weaving could snap back into the fabric of expectation. I'm scared, Dad, he admitted, the words escaping more easily than he anticipated. Scared that if I really commit to this artistic path, I'll fail. Scared that whatever support we're building might not withstand the world out there. He gestured to the windows where the sprawling city seemed indifferent to the delicate processes of human connection. A shift occurred in the room, a new understanding blooming in the space between father and son, a shared vulnerability compelling them toward greater honesty. Jake's father spoke at last, his voice steady but tinged with emotional depth. You'll never be a failure in my eyes, Jake, as long as you are being true to yourself. Jake's heart beat faster, though the words felt heavy with responsibility. A part of him questioned whether he was ready to embrace that mantle, the fear of mediocrity gnawing at him, relentlessly questioning the authenticity of his vision. But what if what I create doesn't matter? What if I'm just lost? A long silence stretched again. His father took a deep breath, the tension palpable. The world doesn't always understand art, especially when it's raw or unconventional. But your job isn't to convince them, it's to express the truth of your experience. It'll take time for everyone, including yourself, to accept that. Jake felt the burden of that truth wash over him, a mix of liberation and intimidation. He understood that embracing vulnerability meant shedding layers of pretense and fear. He would have to confront the haunting specter of doubt that had followed him, questioning whether he was indeed talented, ready, or worthy of the journey ahead. I want to show you my work, but I need you to promise not to judge it through the lens of your dreams, he asked earnestly. Look at it through my eyes, even if it's messy or flawed. I want to keep this dialogue open to help me grow. Can we do that? His father nodded slowly, the resolve in his expression hardening into something akin to determination. Yet as Jake readied himself for the potential breakthroughs that lay ahead, another thought loomed large: what would happen once he ventured into the world of galleries, criticism, and broader validation? Would the embrace of familial support withstand the first taste of public scrutiny, or would it splinter, leaving him exposed once more? The inner conflict swirled, tugging at him. Jake realized he had the power to turn his fears into motivation. Could he harness this moment, transforming it into a launching pad for his artistic journey? Would he be able to navigate through the turbulence that lay beyond, armed with the empathy he had just uncovered? With these questions weighing heavily on his spirit, he stared out at the world, the pulse of uncertainty intertwining with the excitement of possibility. The moment felt pivotal. Every creative risk he'd take from now on would be fueled by this newfound relationship with his father. Yet the true test remained looming as he prepared to step into his new identity. A single thought flooded through him like an electric charge. The real question was not who he could become, but how he would navigate the unseen challenges ahead. Would he rise to meet them, or would old fears drag him back into silence? The next stage of his internal conflict was brewing. A confrontation with the art world's expectations awaited him, and Jake could already feel the tension of that imminent reckoning building within. He had to brace himself. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Jake was propelled by a chilling cocktail of anticipation and dread. Until now, his art had been a refuge, a direct manifestation of his inner landscape. It had been a space curated by his fears, limited by the confines of what he thought he ought to create. Now, however, armed with his father's unexpected support, he had an opportunity to redefine his creative boundaries. In the days that followed, he threw himself into his studio, surrounded by paint-saturated canvases and the smell of turpentine. While it could have been a time of joyful creation, it quickly morphed into a battlefield within him. Each stroke of the brush taunted him with whispers of doubt. Was he really ready to explore the rawness of his emotions? Could he afford to express vulnerability in a world that often dismissed it? With each brushstroke, the colors clashed in chaotic beauty, mirroring the tumult within. Yet, Jake recognized a subtle shift in himself. Where fear once paralyzed him, there now lingered a spark, a taste of empowerment. He found himself piecing together a narrative of self-discovery that he hadn't allowed himself to explore before. Each canvas became a mirror reflecting the intricacies of his mind, the contradictions that he had fought against all his life. Jake decided to document this evolution. Night after night, he filled journals with sketches and thoughts, tracing his readiness to step into the public sphere. What began as mere scribbles transformed into philosophical musings on art's role in his life and the world at large. Through writing, he began to confront the implications of anxiety and inadequacy, pushing against the walls that had long confined him. Despite this newfound sense of purpose, he wrestled with an unsettling variable: the looming art show on the horizon. Scheduled to showcase local talents, it filled him with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Stepping into the gallery, displaying breakfast and breaking bread alongside seasoned artists felt daunting, a reminder of everything he feared, a judgment that was far harder to escape than any family expectation. He practiced daily in front of his mirror, preparing his pitch, rehearsing eloquent descriptions of his pieces. But each time he faced the reflection, the uncertainty clawed at him. What if his effort fell flat? What if the emotions tangled in his brushmarks merely elicited pity instead of appreciation? He could almost hear the derisive snickers echo through the venue, mocking him for embracing authenticity. His heart raced when he finally shared his work with his father for the first time. With bated breath, Jake sought validation as they stood before his latest piece, a portrayal of fractured identity, colors swirling violently in juxtaposition. He watched his father lean closer, studying every contour, every nuance. "What do you see, Dad?" Jake's voice trembled, hoping for a glimmer of approval. "Fear and strength, vulnerability and connection," his father replied, his voice steady. Those words knocked the wind from Jake. They offered exactly what he had been searching for: acknowledgement that his fears had legitimacy, and that his art could simultaneously mirror fear and be shaped by resilience. "Can you feel it?" Jake challenged himself, the question reverberating within. This audience, this impending show, they weren't just critics. They were potential witnesses to his journey. But he also recognized that confrontation awaited. Would he clam up, reverting to the safe confines of external approval, or would he embrace the fight coursing through him? Days slipped by, and anxiety crept in like an unwelcome visitor. Jacob demanded that the brushes do their work, that they carry the authenticity he longed for. Yet, moments of self-doubt would bubble to the surface, leaving him questioning whether he should continue choosing this path. The day of the exhibition dawned, heavy with anticipation. As he ambled toward the gallery, the air crackled with his inner turmoil. The moment of truth was fast approaching, a reckoning not just of his art, but of his identity. Was he ready to face the world on his own terms? Would vulnerability transform into the strength he ultimately sought? Standing in front of the gallery doors, he sensed the weight of an invisible threshold. The next moment would dictate not merely what others saw, but how he perceived himself among them. Jake inhaled deeply, steeling himself for the inevitable confrontation between the artist he aspired to be and the fearful specter of inadequacy that shadowed him as he pushed through the doors. Jake's thoughts ignited a flicker of resolve. He had no choice but to confront the emotions waiting inside both his own and those of the audience. Would they see him for who he truly was, or was he doomed to remain a mere silhouette of unfulfilled potential? The moment Jake stepped into the gallery, the electric buzz of anticipation enveloped him. It was a contrast to the quiet solitude of his studio, a vivid explosion of colors and voices colliding much like the turmoil within him. He hesitated at the threshold, battling the urge to retreat. This was no longer a private sanctuary. It was a stage where vulnerability met scrutiny. His heart thudded in rhythm with the pulse of the crowd. Each glance, each murmur, intensified his inner conflict. The art hung on the walls like exposed flesh, revealing the most intimate parts of his psyche. Jake felt a chokehold of fear but countered it with the memory of his father's words: fear could coexist with strength. Right now he had the opportunity to redefine his identity in front of these unfamiliar faces. As he walked further into the space, he caught fragments of conversations that floated around him. A group stopped in front of his painting, their expressions flickering between curiosity and contemplation. He could feel their eyes dissecting his work, but more importantly, he sensed their curiosity about him. Who was the man behind these fractured canvases? Would they understand the tumultuous struggle that prompted his creative spark? Or would they see nothing but chaos? Jake found a vantage point, allowing himself a few moments of observation. He took note of the way other artists engaged, how they moved with confidence, articulating their inspiration and intention. Each interaction felt like a reminder of the gap between his aspirations and this moment. Was he really equipped to stand next to them? Suddenly, a swirl of emotion burst within him. He was either going to sink back into anonymity or rise to the occasion. He spotted a local art critic, a figure known for sharp insights, approaching a canvas only a few feet away. She was a woman of poise and intensity, armed with a reputation that loomed large in the art community. The gravity of her interest sparked something in him. If he could capture her attention, maybe he could silence his own doubts once and for all. Making his way to one of his canvases, he caught his reflection in the glass display. He straightened his posture, willing himself to embody the strength he so desperately sought. Inside his head, he repeated affirmations of his journey, chasing away self-doubt as he prepared to speak with authority and authenticity. Just as he was about to step forward, he felt the pull of shame. What if he stuttered? What if his words betrayed the vulnerability he was terrified to expose? Frustrated, he pushed past the self-sabotaging thoughts. This was a defining moment. The truth roiled within him, a complex mixture of inspiration, fear, and the hunger for connection. Jake approached the critic, his heart racing. She stood in contemplation before his piece titled Unraveling, a chaotic blend of colors that spoke of duality, tension, and release. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple as he cleared his throat. This piece explores the layers of identity, how we often hide parts of ourselves to fit social expectations. He began, his voice steady yet raw, like his canvas. Faced with her expectant gaze, he felt a surge of determination. He had taken the leap, exposed a piece of his soul, and now he was determined to present not just his art, but the man behind it. There in the gallery he began to paint with words, unveiling the story behind his creation. letting each syllable break down the walls he had built over the years. But as he spoke, an unsettling realization coursed through him. There were still fragments of his identity he wasn't ready to share. The worry lingered, feeding the doubt that curled around his heart. Could he be truly authentic if he withheld parts of himself? Would this moment cement him as an artist or merely illustrate his inadequacy? The critic nodded patiently, yet the scrutiny in her eyes hinted at an imperative question. What more lay hidden beneath the surface? As Jake continued to engage, the uncharted depths of his inner turmoil beckoned. How would he respond when confronted not just by external expectations but by the inner conflicts swirling within him? Would he ultimately embrace the unearthed aspects of himself, or would he allow fear to dictate his future? The night was still young, and the revelation of his journey hung tantalizingly in the balance. Jake's voice wavered slightly, though he pressed on, determined to excavate his thoughts. The critic's eyes remained fixed on him, expectant, challenging him to go deeper than the surface. He could feel the air thickening with urgency, as if the room itself demanded the truth of who he was. There are layers in every person, hidden beneath the facade. My work reflects that struggle, he continued, pushing through his discomfort. With each word, he could sense a subtle shift in the air, a rising tide of connection between him and the critic. For a brief moment, he felt as if he were stepping onto a platform where vulnerability was not just accepted but celebrated. Yet, a flicker of doubt still haunted him. What if he spoke too candidly? Would his hidden scars paint him as weak? Just as these thoughts threatened to engulf him, he recalled the advice from a mentor who once told him, "Art thrives on authenticity." The reminder was a lifeline. Jake took a breath, grounding himself as he decided to share something more personal. The colors in Unraveling are not just random. They mirror emotional chaos, a reflection of my own journey through depression. Saying it aloud felt akin to peeling away a protective layer, revealing raw flesh underneath. The critic didn't flinch. If anything, her attention sharpened, as if she were starting to see through the chaos he attempted to portray. Why choose to express such raw emotion publicly? She leaned in, curiosity woven into her words. This was the moment he had been dreading and yearning for. He could either retreat into safer territory, or he could seize this opportunity to connect on a genuine level. Because I can no longer suffocate them, he replied, feeling the weight of his truth resonate in the air. He could see her nodding, acknowledging the gravity of his admission. The exchange felt palpable. Jake allowed himself a moment to appreciate this connection, but then dread whispered in his ear again. Would this acknowledgement be a double-edged sword? Would revealing this vulnerability make him vulnerable to critique, drowning him in a tidal wave of fear? There were still parts of his story, shadows of his past, that felt too monumental to unveil. Facing those nuances felt daunting. As if reading his mind, the critic inquired, "What do you fear the most about this exposure?" Somehow, her question cut deeper than he anticipated. He felt exposed, but maybe that was the essence of growth, facing uncomfortable truths. What if people only see the struggle and not the growth? He admitted. What if they can't disentangle the pain from the art? The fear tasted bitter, but acknowledging it gave him relief. In that exchange of honesty, he began to understand his own fears rooted not just in judgment, but in his desire for acceptance. Each of her questions chipped away at the fortress he had built around himself. He recognized the transformative power woven into their conversation. As she probed further, seeking insights into his artistic process, he felt a new sense of determination take root within him. Jake began to reflect upon his past, how art had been both a refuge and a battleground. In that moment, clarity washed over him like a cleansing wave. It was no longer about simply being perceived as an artist, but about being seen as a whole person. Art didn't have to be perfect, it had to be honest. Just as confidence began to rise within him, the critic's expression shifted slightly. There was a flicker of comprehension in her eyes. What are you willing to risk to be fully authentic? Her words cut through him, a challenge that resonated deeply. This was no longer just about art. It was about his identity, his entire existence. What was he willing to lose to embrace who he truly was? The question hung in the air as Jake's heartbeat quickened. Risk, what did it even mean in this context? Could he afford to be stripped bare in an unforgiving world? With the gallery pulsing behind him, He felt the weight of potential, a doorway wide open with possibility. Would he step through, liberating himself from the fear that once chained him? The answer sat precariously on the edge of his consciousness, whispering to be unleashed. The night and its revelations were just beginning, and Jake could feel the imminent shake of transformation creeping closer. The following weeks unfolded with an exhilarating unpredictability, as Jake's dual worlds of art and family began to weave together in ways he had never anticipated. Armed with the courage bolstered by his father's tentative acceptance and the support from the art community, he embraced the chaos of creation as a means of authentic expression. With each brushstroke, he moved beyond the limitations previously imposed upon him, exploring emotional depths he had only touched on before. The gallery show had shaken loose layers of pent-up creativity, unleashing a flood of ideas onto canvas that had long been dormant. He chose to develop a new series, one focused on the interrelationship of vulnerability and resilience. Each piece was a testament to his journey, illustrating not just the external layers of emotion, but also the internal complexities of identity. Entering his studio felt increasingly like stepping into a sanctuary, a place where he truly belonged, free from the shackles of familial expectations. On one particularly bright afternoon, Jake was given the opportunity to showcase his series at a prominent local art festival. This was the moment he had yearned for, a chance to step into the limelight not as the son of a man weighed down by legacy, but as a recognized artist fiercely owning his narrative. The stakes felt higher than ever as he prepared his pieces, meticulously choosing every detail from installations to wall descriptions. Yet as the day approached, apprehension crept in. Would he stand firm against judgment from critics? Would his father attend and support, or still cling to doubts? Those lingering questions echoed in his mind, mingling with newfound resolve. This was no longer solely about proving himself, it was about anchoring down his identity. On the morning of the festival, Jake's heart raced with anxious anticipation. Arriving early to prepare, he took a moment to absorb his surroundings, the laughter of newcomers, the vibrant energy weaving through tables and tents, all culminating in the collective celebration of creativity. As the doors opened, he felt an electric thrum in the air. It was time to forge his path anew. Jake presented his work with clarity. As viewers engaged with his pieces, he found himself articulating his artistic process with poise. People crowded around the intricate details he'd woven into the canvases, the experiences of his journey translating, not just to the colors, but into textures that spoke of struggle and triumph. In the sea of conversations, he noticed a familiar face. His father, standing at the edge of the crowd, was observing not with denial or ridicule, but with a hint of curiosity, eyes scanning each piece with genuine interest. As dusk descended, gourmet food trucks punctuated the atmosphere with delightful aromas, but for Jake, it was the award ceremony that held paramount importance. Recognition was not merely an accolade. It was validation of his journey, a testament that he could stand on his own. As the announcer called out the winners of multiple categories, heart and throat, Jake felt both exhilarated and terrified. When the category for Emerging Artist was announced, he gasped, every fiber of his being brimming with hope. He stepped forward when his name echoed through the air, a ubiquitous acknowledgement of both his creative expression and sincere storytelling. The crowd erupted in appreciative applause as he accepted the award, glowing with pride and disbelief. Looking out at the applause, he caught sight of his father in the crowd, clapping and nodding, a proud smile breaking through the surface, a visible symbol of acceptance that transcended their previous tensions. In that moment, Jake realized he was not alone. Here was validation not against the pressure of expectations, but for the courage to choose his own path. After the ceremony, he approached his father, heart pounding, understanding that they had both moved through a transformative experience. There was still much to explore in their relationship, but with that recognition, a chasm had closed. Jake opened the conversation gently. Thank you for coming, Dad. I know this isn't what you envisioned for me. I know, his father replied, emotion thickening his voice. But I'm proud of you, Jake. You took the risk, and it's clear how much it means to you. Their eyes locked in a moment full of potential. The acknowledgement hung between them, a new beginning forged from understanding and acceptance. Jake felt a weight lift, revealing a pathway toward a more authentic connection. With renewed purpose and an invigorated spirit, he looked toward the horizon, not just as an artist but as a man fully committed to embracing his identity. Jake had conquered profound challenges, emerging as a force of creativity rooted in personal experience. He moved forward free to express what lay within, relinquishing old constraints and welcoming a future ripe with possibilities. This was the moment he had achieved aligning passion with profession, emerging as a recognized artist firmly embracing who he was, unafraid to share it with the world. Now in the canvas of his life, he alone held the brush. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now because this is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.